Thanks, everyone. I really enjoyed that last panel, and I do think that if we look out the next 25 or 50 years, this is a technology that is certainly going to have a major impact across all of business and society. And I don't say that lightly. I've been doing this for a long time. But this seems inexorable to me. In fact, I think of it and much more around the notion of automated interactions. You know, when you kind of wipe away all the veneer that we've been talking about here and all the different things that we've been debating about ethics and society and so on, when we remove all of that, I believe where we get to is what we're in the process. Literally, it is happening right under our feet, so it's hard for us to see it. How much we are automating interactions between people. Again, think of how many people are out in the audience already, automating their interactions. You know, the way we listen to music is now digital, right? It's, comes through 2 or 3 different derivatives. You're listening to it on a device. You know, how far are we away from where visual and audio signals are put directly onto the visual and audio cortex of your brain so that a deaf person or a blind person, where the physical organs are no longer functioning, can now hear or see hear like a wolf or see like an eagle, into your 80s and 90s. That is the promise. I quite agree with the last panel that healthcare will absolutely be one of the major areas that we will see a breakthrough in. By the way, if we don't, we're all going to go broke, because with the baby boomer generation now hitting the point of infirmity, if we don't come up with more automated ways of healthcare, whether it's robotics, diagnostics, and so on, we're all going to go broke, because it's rising as a percentage of GDP, even in civilized countries. US almost fits into that. But if you look at Europe or Canada or Australia or China, healthcare costs are rising. And so therefore, we are going to need data and analytics, or what I refer to as automated interactions that keep people out of the hospital. That said, I'm going to leave you with 3 thoughts and then jump into the presentation. First, so AI is going to impact all aspects, right, of society and business over the next 30, 40, 50 years. In fact, it is going to impact human evolution. You probably have heard that just last week, a Chinese scientist using something called CRISPR, which makes programming genes kind of like programming software, was able to remove a defective gene in an embryo, actually before the embryo, in a zygote, and create a fertilized egg and have the birth take place. Now, whether that's true or not, or whether it's an apocryphal story, and we can debate the ethics, it's around the corner. This is going to happen. And whether, we can fight it, but it's now the genie's out of the bag. This procedure can be done for, tens of thousands of dollars. We're not talking millions anymore. So this is going to have an impact. Second, enterprises. Those of you who are in enterprises, whether it's government, whether it's not-for-profit, or whether you're a for-profit business, must invest in building the skills that are going to be necessary to exploit this technology. This is a given. You have no choice. You've got to do this, because businesses are getting disrupted all the time, and increasingly will get disrupted by businesses who are able to take advantage and exploit data and analytics. And we could talk about the digerati over the past, 15 years. Amazon, Alibaba, Tencent, Baidu, Facebook, all those guys. Those companies didn't exist 20 years ago. 5 of the 10 most valuable companies in the world today, by market capitalization, depending on the market, of course, but 5 of the 10 most valuable companies in the world today did not even exist 20 years ago. Now, yes, it's not all about AI, but it certainly is about data and analytics, their ability to profile us, right, has just unprecedented in human history. The ability to collect data. We'll get into that a little bit later. So the second point I want to take away, you must invest in this because you will be disrupted. Every industry will be disrupted. We've already seen that in retail and media and so on. Other industries are on the verge of being disrupted. Second, you need to start your journey, and I'll end with this as well, with solid proofs of concept, right, of how is this going to change my business outcome. For those of you who are talking to your senior business executives, boards of directors, and so on, you have to show them a great story. How is this going to change our business and how, over the next 3 to 5 years? So with that, let's, if we can get this thing to work. There we go. All right. So lots of people talk about, wow, you've got to invest in technology. It's like, well, not exactly. You need to invest in the right technology. Certainly advanced technologies, I talk about them all the time. I'm a futurist, no question about it, and I believe in this. And I believe in lots of interesting technologies. I already said genetic engineering and material science are going to have tremendous impacts on what we see over the next few years. But if you invest in the wrong technology, you're going to go down wrong paths. So I'll not going to talk about this. It's a whole nother speech I give on blockchain. I have yet to hear, yes, there's all kinds of neat ideas about what could happen, what is possible, but nobody's explained to me, right, fundamentally, how is this going to actually change business outcomes for us? Yeah, it could make it, our transactions a little more efficient. Yeah, of course, we could do settlements a little faster, but there's a lot of mixing of metaphors, right? When we talk about public blockchains and immutability and things like that, it's like, that all sounds great, but actually what people are building are private blockchains. And why should anybody keep your blocks in order? And what if they're not, how many servers are you going to have? And why is it going to be immutable? There's so many questions around that. When we get to AI, I can point to things already, right, from an automated standpoint, where we're talking about automated interactions that have already changed. Think about the way we already deal with some customer service or the way ads are placed. We'll go into that in a minute. So what I'm going to talk about very quickly, the first part of the presentation, I'm going to do about 7 or 8 minutes and talk about here's where we're going in the future. Kind of give you some inspiration or frightening things to think about. Here's where we are, and here's how we're going to bridge that gap. So when I think about AI, as I said, I really think of this as automated interactions. And what I think about is this is just another piece, a very important one, but another piece of digital business, which is what we're all headed towards, right? Improving the efficiencies of our business. I'm going to just put aside all the ethical considerations that we talked and heard about in the last presentation. Yep, we have to worry about those. But business marches inexorably forward. So we're at the digital business kind of crossroads up at the top, kind of in the late 2018, headed into 19. And we're also headed towards now what we call algorithmic or autonomous business. And I'm going to give you some definitions of what that means and some examples that are already occurring. But hint, this is about smart machines, it's about Internet of Things, and it's not just buzzwords I'm throwing out. This, again, you can boil all this out and it still comes out to what I'm getting is orders of magnitude more data that I can now operate on. That's what the Internet of Things is all about. So we had situational awareness for the past 20 years on us. We were the things that were being monitored by Google and Facebook and Amazon and Alibaba at an unprecedented level. The amount of data they were able to collect, the amount of predictions they were able to do about what we're going to buy and when we're going to buy it and how we're going to buy it. And now, of course, with those of you who have an Alexa, the greatest Trojan horse since the Trojan horse. Those of you who have, literary background, you'll recall, back in Troy, the Trojan horse was brought into the city. Think about it, right? Every time you interact with Alexa, it, whatever you, is collecting more information about you, right? It is now also listening to your voice, can determine, so is Dale happy or sad? You know, and there's going to be there is a camera on it, should you turn it on, or maybe it'll turn on itself. But in other words, it's going to be able to watch you. Think of all the information it's collecting. And, you know, I talk to my daughter about it and say, you know, try to explain to her GDPR and what that means and privacy, and her attitude is, so what, it's convenient. You know, she's a millennial, she's 23, she lives in New York, and it's like, so what? You know, they're just going to try and sell me more stuff. That's actually not the word she used, but, you know, the point being, and she doesn't care about the privacy. She's okay with it. And she works for Google, by the way, so she's not worried about Alexa. Anyway, moving on. So when we talk about algorithmic business, so when I think of AI, I think of algorithms, of course. You know, we can talk about all this fuzzy stuff out here, but what we're really talking about is the ability to solve problems. What is algorithmic business? It's the enablement, right, of creating business value through the action of algorithms on data. Right? That's really what we're talking about in algorithmic business. Now, I'll give you some examples here, but you can imagine them all the time. Right? Today, trading, you know, if you think about foreign exchange, is all done by algorithms. You know, Siemens wants to trade 100 million euros for dollars. There's no human beings involved in that. Somebody puts it in, I want to, you know, translate or exchange 100 million euros for dollars. Great, maybe 8 or 10 banks will bid on that. That's algorithm against algorithm. You have 60 milliseconds to make a decision. There's no human beings that can do that. Right? That's just one example. You know, imagine we were talking about healthcare. I walk into a doctor, actually I'd walk into a clinic where it takes my, you know, maybe takes my blood, you know, then in the future, maybe the next Theranos will do that. I walk into a CVS, takes my blood, figures out, okay, here's the likely condition, here's what's going on, and compares, right, assuming I gave it permission, my genomic profile to the other 1,000 people in the world who may have the same mutation as I did, and says, oh, here's the drug they were treated with. And here's the one that worked on the person that is most like you. Can doctors do that? Really? They deal with a few thousand patients in a production line, maybe a few hundred depending on the specialty. So of course, algorithms are already changing the way we're thinking about it. Now when we think about autonomous business, you say, come on, that's all a bunch of bull. Over the next few years, you will see businesses that have virtually no people. Yeah, there'll be people at the head, the capitalists that kind of manage the whole thing, but I'm going to give you some examples of where we're already going in that business to show that, right? And so I think of, you know, when I talk to executives, I say, so who in your business, in other words, in your competition, is going to be the most automated? Who's going to have the most automated plants? So one of the things I'll talk about in a couple minutes is replicated factories around the world, right? Who can do this well, and can they, you know, replicate it very quickly? Will this be disruptive? Hell yes, because you'll be able to get around tariffs. You'll be able to get around some of the crazy neo-nationalism we have. If you have a factory everywhere and it's replicated and it's run the same, you can get tremendous efficiency. So this is a made-up word, by the way. I do this all the time. So I refer to this autonomosity. Right? That's one of those things you can walk away with. It's a made-up word. I've used it for a few years, and it's the tendency of machine systems, businesses, or processes to become more autonomous. In other words, to work more on their own. We're not saying Terminator, but in other words, they can operate on their own. The algorithms are set in motion, and they work pretty well. Case of, I gave you already as an example, looking at foreign exchange or other equities trading. By the way, you know, we talk about blockchain making all this stuff simple. Do you realize that 25 years ago, to trade a stock on NASDAQ cost approximately 25 cents a share, give or take, right? And then there was also a spread of another, you know, could be as much as 10 cents, 15 cents, you know, a few percent. Today, you can trade it for 0.02, less than 2 cents. How did they do that without a blockchain? How does Fidelity basically offer you, if you want to do exchange-traded funds now, some of them you can trade for free? How are they able to do all that automated transaction stuff without a blockchain? You think blockchains are going to disintermediate that? Tell me what the business value is going to be again. All right, all joking aside. So, first, I want to spend a couple minutes now go back to reality. If you're looking at advanced technology like AI, here are the three most important things. You're going to make a presentation to your senior business leaders or your board of directors. What are the business outcomes, right? And this is, you're painting a picture. This is a visionary, aspirational. How's this going to help our business? Or if we're in government, how's this going to, we're building a smart city. How is it going to change what we do? How's it going to, what are our customers or our constituents going to get as value out of this? Right? So that's one piece, and then great, if we're in a business, we got to make money. If we're a government, we need to be more efficient, more services for the same amount of money or even less money. Very important. You want to understand this. We're all technologists here. Look, I love technology. I think it's a blast following it. But it's important to understand the trajectory in the economics. Why oil and gas is going to hit a triple tipping point, which I'll talk about here in a minute. Why it's going to hit a triple tipping point in the next 10 or 15 years. Yeah, okay, environment and regulatory have a lot to do with it, but in the end, it's just technology. Alternative energies, just the price keeps going down, right? According to Bloomberg, we're almost at the crossover point where generating kilowatts out of solar and wind are equal to that of the cheapest gas or oil. And have already surpassed, or I should say surpassed, are already significantly less than nuclear, if you look at operating, shutdown, all the other costs associated with it, or coal. Already passed. We have other issues, but that's a really important point. What's the technology trajectory, price performance, capabilities, et cetera? Now, are there synergies with other technologies? So the way I like to think about business outcomes is first, explain to me what the cost is, right? What is the risk? What's the value? And then look at opportunities. If I do this new technology, what new products or services could I get? Could I enhance my customer experience? What about increased engagement with my customers? Am I just going to optimize, right, some of my existing processes? So I'd argue, yeah, blockchain could certainly help that. I'm going to kind of throw that in occasionally. Yeah, it could, but is it really worth the effort to spend all that time and effort to maybe do a little bit of optimization? Since I already pointed out, transactions have been optimized by an order of magnitude during the past 25 years. I might use some things to improve security. Again, I think that this is a great example of AI can certainly be used for recognizing threat patterns already being done. I guarantee any security vendor you talk to today is going to, oh no, we use AI to recognize threat patterns, of course, and report them and figure out where they're going. Already happening, right? And could we use it to conserve resources? So I mentioned the triple tipping point. Again, I give a whole speech on this, but I'm just going to spend 1 minute. So, the most important piece of this is technology, no question. If the price performance of technology and the capabilities of technology continue to improve, then kind of the business and culture will kind of fall in line and the regulators ultimately adapt, right? So you think about a company like Uber as an example that disrupted taxis. That was the technology. They didn't invent it, by the way. They didn't invent GPS. They didn't invent social networks. They didn't invent payments. They put it together. Combinatorial innovation. Remember that word as well. It's not made up. It's just a point. In other words, rather than going out and trying to invent the wheel, they said, hey, we'll take a piece from here, a piece from here, and we create this ride sharing. By the way, the taxi companies are all doing something similar now, just not as well. Now, regulation is sort of catching up, and of course, business and culture, people love the idea of just, hailing a cab with your phone. So again, when you think about this triple tipping point, so we've already hit it in retail, right? It's not that retail is going to go away, but if you don't have an online presence, you're up the creek without a paddle, right? And you better have a good one. and it better be damn good over the next few years. So that's already happened. Already happened in advertising. You see people, advertising, online advertising, and publishing companies hitting the wall all the time. So when is that triple tipping point going to be in your industry? And you'd say, well, hey, we're regulated. We're fintech. Yeah, that's what the banks in China thought. Somebody told me the Chinese government would allow interlopers like Alibaba through Ant and Tencent through WeChat, it's a payment app, they would let them compete with state-owned industries. If you told me that 5 years ago, I said, you must have been spending too much time in California. That ain't going to happen, right? And yet, Ant Financial in the last 5 years has raised $300 billion in deposits and is likely to go public given all the other crazy stuff going in the market. But they'd already filed what's called an S1, which is their intention to go public. The valuation will be $150 billion, or was going to be. That makes Ant Financial in 5 years, the 10th most valuable bank in the world. How did they do that? Answer, the regulators got out of the way. They used, obviously, all the information that Alibaba has on their customers to get people to buy in. So, you've heard this at this conference. I'm just going to buzz through the data collection part because, look, AI is all about data collection. I was doing AI 25 and 30 years ago when it was these crazy symbolic stuff. In fact, there was symbolics and Lisp machines and so on. Those were inference engines. Because we have all the data today, you have to do less inferences, right? You have more surety of the outcome. You have better predictability, right? That's the biggest change that we have in all this math and everything else that people talk about. That's the biggest change. And of course, so orders of magnitude more data. We're about to get a few more orders of magnitude as we start collecting information from sensors, right? Internet of Things, sensors everywhere. Cars went from dozens to hundreds, are going to thousands of sensors. Every road, every street light, every light in general, everywhere you walk. Or as a music group said, every move you make will be watching you. The Chinese are already there. So data collection is critical. Curation of that data, which many people here have already talked about, so I'm not going to go into it. What do you mean by curation? Well, I have to make sure it's safe, secure. I have to worry about privacy. I have to worry about organizing data sets. I have to worry about, that funny term called normalizing the data so I can actually move it and operate on it. That has propelled an entire industry, as I said, in the e-commerce space. So this is the new fuel for decisioning. The trajectory in economics, you ain't seen nothing yet, right? This is about to go crazy because all of a sudden the price of sensors has fallen, what a surprise, by order of magnitude already. The capability of those sensors, we're talking about whether it's a camera sensor, whether it's a sonic sensor, whether it is a sensor that detects what's going on inside your body, in your Apple or watch or your Fitbit or whatever that's taking your blood pressure. Yeah, okay, it's not going to happen overnight, but boy, when you step back and look over time, it sure feels like it's happening pretty quick. Yeah, there's some caveats here, no question about it. Business unit data ownership, integration and management costs, privacy, all that's going to happen. But you still got to move on this, right? The curation caveats around data governance and data set, yeah, it's hard, but this is something you absolutely, unequivocally must invest in because if you don't, you can't get to the next steps. So I think of this as the money chart is the 6 C's of data, I call it. And the first, if you start up in the far right-hand corner, you got to figure out how to collect it. What data to collect and how to collect it. Right? So, if you think about data, more data is good. Good data is better than bad data, and more good data is the best of all. So if you get that, you can then move on to now we're going to do data governance and management. I call that curation. This is the basic, think of this as real-time business intelligence. We already been doing that. We're just going to do it a little bit better, right? When I say real-time, we're able to analyze what's going on. This is where the AI part fits in, right? Machine learning, But you notice there are 6 other things you got to get done here before you get to all the AI stuff we're talking about. So you better get these 3 done before you get to the AI. This is, again, pattern matching and so on. But by the way, before you jump to that, you ought to figure out also, how are we going to monetize this? If we could do this, how would we monetize it? And monetize, even if you're a government or a not-for-profit, is extremely important. When we say monetize, if you're in government or a not-profit, it would be great. How do we become more efficient? How do we use the money we have to develop better services? And then, of course, some kind of cloud computing, whether it's yours or whether you go to some other cloud provider. It's all about provisioning resources. So AI, algorithms, analytics, I kind of throw all those things together because they're different peas in a pod. And yeah, the technologies are different. But if you step back, again, imagine you're talking to a senior executive. You don't want his or her eyes to cross when you start talking about all this techie stuff. Just say, look, we're going to be able to analyze this stuff a lot better and figure out what's going on. So what we're going to see is rapid increases in automation. That'll improve efficiencies. Again, these are some of the business and society outcomes that we talk about. And here's some examples, by the way, of algorithmic business in action. Right? You go to make a hotel reservation like this week, if you wanted to stay, for instance, in the Seaport Hotel, it was full. So they always leave a few rooms because they know people will cancel. But yeah, you want to pay $500? Right? That's not done by a human being. That's done by an algorithm. If that last seat on the plane, obviously if there were rooms empty and it's now an hour before, or a few hours, say, in the day before, if that room goes empty, the marginal cost of that room is about whatever the cost of cleaning is, $5 or $10. In other words, they could sell that room for anywhere from $20 to $50 and make money on it. Same with an airline seat. Google and Facebook ad placements, all done by algorithms. Employment, dating site matchups, all done by algorithms. Precision agriculture, you'd say, agriculture? Of course. We're now on agronomy. The most important cash crop, or fastest growing cash crop in the US is cannabis, of course. It's not grown by a bunch of hippies in California anymore. It's grown by agronomists. They get 3 crops a year. They know the exact amount of THC. It's grown indoors in a laboratory. It's process manufacturing. How did the Dutch, huge country, of course, become one of the top agriculture exporting countries in the world? They don't have low-cost labor. They don't have necessarily cheap energy. They're incredibly efficient. Everything is precision. Robo-advisors, high-speed trading, we already talked about that. Insurance, claim, and churn management, already happening. Credit rating and loan scoring, people like Quicken Loans. Actually, Ant Financial does loan scoring and credit rating, all done with algorithms. And, of course, customer engagement and medical conditions. So even though I'm on the advisory board of a hospital, I predict that in 30-ish years, doctors will be obsolete. 30-ish years, we'll come back, assuming I'm still alive. I'll be dead, so it won't matter. But, it could happen sooner. Again, think of production line and, condition analysis that I talked about before. It's possible. Strongest union in history, so it may take longer. All right, trajectory and economics. AI software tools are maturing. A few years ago, you had to buy and build. Now all of the major vendors, obviously some of them on the floor, are selling tools. AI is going to be increasingly embedded into most new software packages. By the way, so will blockchain over the next couple of years. So why are you going to build this again? Yes, you still have to do the basics, but you're going to be able to buy, certainly from all of the major cloud and service vendors. You can buy into Watson, you can buy into, Amazon Cloud has it, Microsoft Azure has it, Google has it with TensorFlow. There are ways now to do it where you can spend less money. They're offering AI templates and tools. That is the step towards maturity that we needed. The caveat, yeah, you still need high expertise. You're going to have to spend a lot of money. And this is something Gartner does a lot. It's called our hype cycle. You'll see some examples: autonomous vehicles, predictive analytics. We're kind of headed down. The slope of, we call it the trough of disillusionment. But we're a couple years away from those things going crazy, right? But we're already at augmented reality, GPU accelerators, speech and ensemble learning. So some of these things have already happened, but the things kind of on that downslope, yep, there's going to be a lot of disappointment because this is tough, right? And when we think about artificial intelligence in a timeline, we think of narrow AI, not general AI. So people keep talking about, oh, AGI, automated general intelligence, the Terminator and blah, blah, blah. If that happens at all, it's 20 plus years out. I'm one of those who believes, yeah, it could, but it's going to happen by the combination of multiple things. In other words, why the hell do we want a robot to mimic a human being when 80% of our brain is reptilian, the limbic part of our brain, and we use it for basically for survival. Survival means procreation, which means we have to eat, sleep, have clothing, etc. We have to survive to procreate. Why is that? Why do we want to have a robot think about those things, right? So we, still occupy a significant part of our brain doing that. So narrow AI, you do a task and another task, and again, these things are already going to be significantly better. That is why autonomous vehicles will happen faster than most people think, right? By the way, baby boomers, I only got another 10 or 15 years where they're going to try to take my driver's license away because I'm too senile to drive. And they're going to pry that steering wheel out of my cold, dead hands. There ain't no way that's happening. I will be the first in line for an autonomous vehicle. So you can imagine, I happen to live in the country, there will be a sign on a few roads that said, danger, humans piloting vehicles for the next 10 miles. Guarantee that will be a New Yorker ad in maybe 15 years' time. All right, so tightly scoped machine learning solutions are the way you should think about this. All right, last couple slides, and then I got to get off because Elliot's going to kill me. But so the technology synergies are there. AI and algorithms are now being used to build new capabilities on top of old machine learning that we already had. Right? Chatbots are another, whether it's Echo or whether it's Siri or whatever, they are learning on the job. I gave the example of, Alexa being the Trojan horse. And of course, we're about to see massive output out of IoT because people are putting these physical sensors everywhere. We're now going to have situational awareness across the world of everything that's going on. New chips, optimizing data and analytics, as an example, from companies like NVIDIA, are moving ahead pretty rapidly. Doesn't like me. Okay. Last point, a couple points on advanced manufacturing and what's happening here. So this isn't directly AI. I just thought I'd make the point because I think of, again, automated interactions. I think of, because of all the tariffs and regional fighting and shipping costs, we're going to start seeing replicated factories, which means factories that don't have humans in them. If you go to an oil refinery today versus 30 or 40 years ago, I actually had that pleasure, there is 1/10 the number of employees at a refinery. Increasingly on oil rigs, they're using robots, and I'll call them automated operational machines, right, to do a lot of the work. They're doing remote engineers. You have to have a petroleum engineer kind of supervising a rig. Well, you could do that remotely. Well, you mean you couldn't have a surgeon do that? Of course you could do that, for operations. So all of these things are just starting to happen. Yeah, it's expensive, which is why we haven't seen this take off. But again, the pricing of robots, because the components, the electric motors, the processors, the sensors, all of those are getting cheaper. And you watch over the next 3 years, mark my words, China in particular, because they're investing like crazy, and Japan, companies like SoftBank, which have been buying up a lot of the components, are going to get seriously into the robotics business. Helper robots, again, for aging people like us. So we're going to see all kinds of interesting, I call it hyper-automation, medical diagnostics, 3D printed organs. All of these are going to happen. Yeah, not as fast as some people thought, but we're already beginning to see a lot of those. The hybridization. When you think of a robot, you don't have to think of it as, this anthropomorphic device. It's basically the capability to have a little more flexibility on your factory floor. We've been dreaming of that. So, recommendations. I realize this has been a pretty fast ride. I've gone 10 minutes over, but here we go. AI investments should be based on 3 to 5 year business outcomes, right, driven by the technology trajectory, evolution, synergies. Plan it out. Come up with a great story. Invest in data collection and curation, what and how to collect it as a precursor. In other words, this is what you have to do before you go after the major AI initiatives. Just like I tell people in blockchain. If you haven't figured out how you're going to resolve the data among your suppliers that are upstream, why are you doing a blockchain for them? Unless you're Walmart and can say, you're doing it our way. Anyway, monitor AI technologies that are going to give you a competitive advantage and when they'll reach a triple tipping point in your industry. You should have a regular update with your business executives, governance boards to discuss investment status, what you're doing, how's it going to change your business. And last but not least, you should start thinking about, as you move in this, what are some of the leading indicators? What kind of metrics would we use to measure progress? If we're going to do something over 3 to 5 years, you got to have a business plan. And that part of that business plan is you've got to have milestones. So the first year we're going to be here. The second year, we may not make money out of this for 3 to 4 years, but here's where we're going. With that, good luck. Thanks a lot.